All right, let's talk about Perma Vaal skills. So basically every build creator, once they saw this enchant, knew what was going to happen this league. It was going to be mayhem. And I've basically been saving up for this and cooking for the last 3 to 4 days. Also, big shout outs to Void241, who's been cooking with me a little bit. And yeah, in general, I'm pretty pleased with this version right now, but it is not going to stay this. It is definitely going to change quite a bit over time, but I just want to present and kind of throw out what I have so far. First up, this build will completely lag you out. And like, if you don't have the Vulcan Lightning Strike effect, even worse. All of these other effects are completely terrible. But as you can see right here, I can just stand in my hideout and basically spam as many as I want. There is a mini cooldown, I think, but it is not as bad as in, for example, builds that are only reliant on Rage on hit. And the reason I can do this is because of passive regen with Chainbreaker. But we're going to go over that in a second. I guess the first thing we need to talk about is why are Perma Vaal skills broken now? They used to exist and they used to be good. Vaal Lightning Strike has been played by Jungrum, for example, last league, and it is a viable build. It always kind of was. But what puts it apart this league? And I guess important to talk about here is how you actually get the soul gain prevention of Vaal skills to 0%. The soul gain prevention is, as it says, the time where you don't get any souls, or with Hateforge, the time where you cannot regenerate rage. So you need to get this down to 0. Now, Vaal skills have a line down here that says modifiers to skill effect duration also apply to soul gain prevention, which also means reduced. So what people did is they went Triumvirate Authority. Socketed skills have 30% reduced soul gain prevention duration. You could get some other good mods on it, but you're basically on a 1 link with some extra power, probably 4 to 5-ish link. And then you could also go Soul Catcher with 10% reduced soul gain prevention duration, which scales with Flask effect. So let's say that gave you like 45% reduced skill effect duration. You just had to fill that up with stuff like, for example, these nodes right here with Window of Opportunity and the small nodes, and then a combination of Warp Timepiece and Time Clasps, which go up to, I think, -20, +20, and -20 skill effect duration. And yes, this would reduce the soul gain prevention to complete 0. The problem is you just reduced your duration. So in a sense, you also butchered Vaal Lightning Strike a bit, right? And it was still really strong. That's the important part to know. But you reduced your base duration of your Vaal Lightning Strike, which is 6 seconds, like this orb right here that you put down, usually lasts for 6 seconds. You had to reduce that as well because you had to use global reduction, right? So this would be reduced to like 2.4 seconds, 2.4 to 3 seconds, depending on your setup. And that's just not needed anymore. Because of this enchant, you now have actual 6-second Vaal Lightning Strike, or whatever you want to put in. But yeah. And this enchant is ridiculously expensive right now. And it's for good reason. Once you farm it up, you will kind of note. What you also need is Hateforge. Now, let's talk about how this skill actually... I guess one more thing that you have to realize is we don't have to use the ring anymore. This is actually even more important. You don't have to use Triumvirate anymore. So now that it's on a weapon, it says socketed Vaal skills, you can actually support it and you can make something like this with like Shaper mods and Elder mods. Socketed gems are supported by blah, blah, blah. And then you can go Squire. For example, here I have a 10 link. At the centerpiece of all of this is Hateforge. There's a few mods that matter. Reduced rage cost is nice and whatnot. Vaal attack skills you use yourself cost rage instead of requiring souls. So that's why you don't need to kill anything. You don't need to hit anything. As you can see right here, my rage is basically... Now, you might see real quickly that my rage is actually going down as I'm pressing this, and it basically fills back up immediately. Now, Hateforge is just the first piece of the puzzle, and that's why this build needs so many uniques, which is a huge downside to, for example, survivability, but we're going to go over that as well. You cannot gain rage during soul gain prevention. We just basically circumvented that with the enchant. So how does it work? So this spell right here, Chains of Emancipation. When you lose temporal chains, you gain maximum rage. Immune to curses while you have at least 25 rage, which means that if you somehow can get under 25 rage, get to 25 rage again, you will lose temporal chains because you're now curse immune, and it will fill you up immediately. You pair that, in order to self-curse yourself, you use Rotblood's Promise. Now, there is obviously also the gloves that can self-curse, but you can't use them because you need Hateforge. So Rotblood Promise is kind of the only way to do it, at least as far as I know. But don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some wild versions out there this league. So socketed gems are supported by level 20 Blasphemy. Socketed skills also affect you. So you can put in, for example, temporal chains. Now, I don't think it really matters if you put in level 1 or a 21 because you're on low rage for so short and you're never going to attack while you're there. So it should never be an issue that you're going to get slowed down. You should just be immune to curses. Now, these setups with Chains of Emancipation and Rot Blood Promise basically go back as old as time. So if you want to research about it, definitely go back a few leagues. People have been doing this forever. A big one was, for example, in Crucible League when people played Vaal Volcanic Fissure with it, because there was a certain enchant that already reduced the Vaal soul cost by 80% instead of 100%, and then they got the rest with the Flask, so they could also get to 100% reduced, right? So there was already stuff like that, but I think this is going to revitalize the setup quite a bit. Okay, so far so good. You apply Self-Temp Chains. When you lose it, you go to full rage. The rage cost of your main skill has to bring you to exactly 24 rage. As you can see right here, I have 52 maximum rage right now. That's what I'm at in Hideout. And it doesn't degen because of Chainbreaker, but my skill costs exactly 28 rage. So 28 rage right here, 52 minus 28, it gets you to exactly 24 rage. And then the region of Chainbreaker takes over. So this keystone right here, mana recovery from regeneration is not applied. Basically, mana recovery is transformed into rage recovery. So this scales with all flat mana regen and percentage mana regen. For example, I currently have, I think, 16 rage a second. In endgame, I'm going to have more, but I think it's actually too much. I'm not exactly sure yet what the right number is. Now, there's one issue that a lot of people have found when you want to theory craft this, and that is PoB is a little bit weird with rage cost right now. So just so you know, the rage cost from Chainbreaker does scale with increases to mana cost. So for example, I don't know, returning projectiles, 150 cost reservation, that counts for Chainbreaker for the +3. It will increase it all the way to, like, I think on this build, like +14. However, it does not increase your main mana cost. I actually had to import an old Hateforge right here from an old patch. I don't know what exactly happened with maybe the coding or whatever, but it does not increase the soul cost. Otherwise, it wouldn't work on any build. Also important, the reduced cost on Tireless and Hateforge does not work on the main skill in PoB, but it does work in game. So you have to also keep that in mind. So for example, when you see this here, it does work on the Chainbreaker part, as you can see, but it does not work on the soul cost, but it does in game. In terms of rage cost reduction, the only things that still are in the game is on Hateforge itself. You can manipulate the reduced rage cost of skills. It goes from 10 to 25. You can also get the Tireless cluster, which still just says cost. Basically, everything that says cost works. Everything that says life cost or mana cost does not. The only other thing that's new, an addition that I've seen that works, is Savage Intensity here, which gives you 20% reduced cost of attack skills while you have at least 20 rage, which would be up on the build. In general, I think it's a really nice touch, and you can definitely use it. You probably should use it. You can, for example, get it with an Impossible Escape on Imbalanced Guard or something. Grab yourself some max res. In this build, it didn't really do anything to reduce my cost because I got to where I wanted to be without it. So far, I think pretty clear, right? Like everything is kind of working. You just have to get it together and kind of do the math and whatnot. And then you have this. And you can do it on every skill that's usable on Dagger, or you can use a certain unique weapon, which is Surless Masterwork. As a lot of people have pointed out, you can also have this enchant on this weapon because it says it can be runesmithed as if it was any one-handed melee type. So you can put dagger mods on, claw mods on, whatever you want. Important to note, though, is it's a really bad weapon. You can have 2 enchants on, but it's incredibly bad. You have like really low attack speed, low crit, no flat damage to note of. Basically, what you get is a 6-link with Squire, so you have to sacrifice your shield and your weapon, and then you still have to get flat damage somewhere, which only gets multiplied by 1.4. So I still think this is going to be viable just because the setup is so goddamn broken. And for example, I mean, Vaal Volcanic Fissure is probably worth it still. Now, if you're asking, pal, how much damage is this? How can I calculate it in PoB? All I can tell you is that it depends on your PC specs because this build will completely lag you out. I don't want you to go out and buy expensive shit and then all of a sudden you can't play the game. It completely lags me out. I can play it off stream pretty well on my setup, but while I'm on stream, this is basically the quality you're looking at, right? This is how my PC is going to react. I'm completely pixelated. People are basically watching in 160p. So keep that in mind. It will be an issue. And if you have a bad PC, even worse. Now, that being said, why am I mana stacker right now? So if we look at my recent pod right here, which is not finalized, but it's kind of what I want to get to eventually, you will see a little bit of a mana theme, right? I'm Mind Over Matter, obviously Chainbreaker, I scale mana regen. I do a lot of things. I'm also Scion, which is a little bit wacky. Why? So I don't know what the best version of this build is yet. This is just what I came up with yet after For example, Theory Crafting a Slayer, which I think is also very strong. I preferred this one a little bit more. The main thing with this build is it has a lot of problems to solve because of how many uniques it has to use, right? These are basically, so these are locked in, and then you have your Squire locked in, your weapon locked in, and then you have a few pieces to play around with. And I feel like mana stacking, and I call it semi-mana stacking, because we're going to have like 5k mana in endgame. We're not going to go higher. We're not going to go crazy, but it is still a really good multiplier. So the first thing is obviously Rage Sustain. So with Chainbreaker, I wasn't really sure how much Rage I'm going to need to comfortably go from that 24 to 25 mark. And that's because I don't really know in what like instances the mana regen ticks. Because if I want to, for example, with 0.25 attack speed, actually place it 4 times a second, I don't know if that's actually possible and if I'm currently doing that. Maybe not, maybe I do. But I don't know exactly how much mana regen I got. So just for testing the build, I wanted to have a lot of access. And stacking a lot of mana gives you a lot of base regen. It also means that while some builds will be able to still get the mana regen with, for example, a Shavron's Revelation, which gives you, with Catalyst, 48 mana per second, in endgame, I want to go Nemesis. So I want to go Nemesis plus Rot Blood, so this will not be at my disposal at all. So then if I'm, for example, a Slayer, now I have to fix that on a non-mana stacker. And then I don't have that luxury, right? That was basically my thinking. The second thing is survivability is an issue. Now, this is definitely not a tanky build, but honestly, with what we're doing, we can get a lot of max hit, right? The Fizz max hit is never going to be impressive on this build. Unfortunately, there are setups. After seeing how much damage it deals, there's definitely other setups you can go for. You can go for Chaos and whatnot. You can probably get to like 20, 30k Fizz max hit. You can get endurance charges another way, maybe get better boots like life, mana, whatnot. But in general, you are capped. And mana does weirdly fix this while also fixing some of the other problems. The first one being flat damage. Since we are using a dagger right here, I crafted this one today on stream. I'll probably make a video about it or highlight it or something. But I basically got 4 support gems. You can make this pretty deterministically, but what you're not going to get is flat damage reliably. You're just not going to get it. But you want this dagger. You don't want to get flat damage on your dagger. That is the very budget version. So you have to get your flat damage elsewhere. And the first thing I thought was, okay, I'm just going to go Strength Stacker, Alberons. But with the removal of Battle Mage's Cry, it very quickly became apparent that it's not the way to go. Do I think it's still viable? Sure. But I don't think it's that good, especially when you have both of your rings locked into something else, right? Like, you want to have those helical rings. You don't want to be in the situation where you're going to be running around with like 1,500 strength, in my opinion. So it didn't really work out. The flat damage gets fixed by first this helmet, Mind of the Council, which gives 6% of maximum mana to your attack skills as added lightning damage. This is average damage, not maximum damage, important to know. So it's actually quite strong. So even at 5k mana, right, we can just look this up. Even at 5k mana, you're getting a good, chunky 300 base damage. That would be like, I think like 2 Wrath Auras, right? Like, for example, 1 to 599 or something. And the reason the helmet also works out is because it also has 30% max mana. It's just not a bad helmet at all. It also has good evasion, which getting to like 5-6k evasion, getting your first 50-60% chance to evade is very strong. Then we have the synergy of this semi-mana stacker with Shroud of the Lightless. So first I had Chaos here, and I found pretty quickly that Shroud of the Lightless actually scales a little bit better because it gives you a lot of the things that the right side of the tree usually has. For example, attack speed and crit multi. As you can see right here, I am mostly focused on the left side, and I'm leaving a lot of these power points on the right side. Yeah, I just can't take them. I also can't take a lot of life nodes because I'm so strapped on points. So in general, it's just a lot of max life, max mana, pen. I mean, there's not much more to say. It just kind of worked out. I'm sure Camo's version is worth as well. You would probably half your damage though, just FYI. Yeah, mana regen for Chainbreaker, obviously get a lot of mana, get a lot of inherent mana regen, and then also resistances. So this has to do with being Scion. So Scion gives you Pathfinder Scion, which is one of the strongest, just the strongest Scion Ascendancy. Pathfinder gives you a ton of flasks to stand on its own, movement speed, attack speed, bleed removal, and then it also lets you path really nicely. Obviously, I'm going to respec these later, but you have all these quality mana nodes that you would take anyways that also give you flask effect, flask duration, right? These also give you flask effect. It's just very good and efficient pathing, so that's why we kind of ended up with that. And the reason that's good is because resistances. As you can see right here, we're super strapped on resistances right now. Yeah, so we have a Amethyst Flask, which is almost always up. while in hideout, it's not perfectly up. I'm probably going to put this on at the end of effect, actually, because I think it's like 80 or 90% up, but these are always up, right? So that's very important. You can fix all resistances basically on flasks, quite strong, get a little bit of extra on our Jade Flask. In general, yeah, I felt like it was a good setup. You can still get Slayer and Slayer Leech on top. Another reason I wanted to go with Mana Stacking on attack-based build is because it's just very strong with instant Mana Leech. Spellcasters just don't get that. They have to stack like Regen, Recoup, and whatnot. On an attack build, I mean, you're just filling up immediately. Now, there are also builds that don't play Chainbreaker, versions out there right now that are using Rage support, or for example, the Berserker small nodes, which if you didn't know, got buffed at the very end of the patch notes, right on the bottom. It just says 1 Rage on attack hit, which also counts for your projectiles. So theoretically, while you're in combat, you can still get that perma Rage. You can't do it in hideout, but while you're in combat. The reason why people want to do this is because Chainbreaker got nerfed, right? The Rage loss is not interrupted by Chainbreaker's regen anymore. So you have to basically work against that degen that is going to kick in eventually. You can see here, lose 10 rage per second if you have not been hit or gained rage in the last 2 seconds. So it still happens while I'm in combat if I'm like placing the Vaal Lightning Strikes on top of enemies. But outside of combat, yeah, you have to stack more mana regen. And I still think it's worth it. And I'll tell you why. It's not just because showing off in hideout, right, and lagging out your hideout. It's because rage gain on hit has an inherent 0.5 second cooldown. You can see this right here. It doesn't matter how much rage you get per hit, that cooldown still remains. If you get 5 rage on hit versus 10 rage on hit, that still means you can only get 2 instances of that. And for us, it doesn't matter whether we get 5 or 10. It only matters how fast we get it once we're on 24. For example, Vengeful Cry, which is definitely something we're going to play around with. We're also going to play around with the Rage Mastery right here that gives you 1 rage per 5 enemy power up to +5. For that, though, we would have to sacrifice a lot of points because I still need that +7 here. So I would have to get to another rage cluster. And then I would also have to grab these nodes right here with the Warcry cooldown recovery. So it's a little bit of a setup. We could go General's Cry and just basically block the degen. Those are all things that might have to happen, but in general, Chainbreaker has been solving those issues on its own. So there will also be a ton of non-Hateforge setups, right? Like if you think about what power you could gain from removing these free uniques, it's huge, especially Belt Slot, right? It's incredible. So you could just have a normal build where you just press your Vaal Lightning Strike more often, because what you have to realize is this still means that once you plop down your Vaal Lightning Strike, even without Hateforge, it's still going to deal damage, and that damage fills itself up. So you can still place a Vaal Lightning Strike every 2 seconds or so. So that's still very strong. So this enchant will be strong on normal builds as well. Don't get me wrong. With Vaal Lightning Strike, it's obviously less powerful in terms of what the Vaal skill does. A lot less. You're casting once every 2 seconds instead of like 4 a second. But especially with Vaal LS, one of the nice side effects of only being Vaal Lightning Strike instead of Lightning Strike is it also adds hits can't be evaded, which means I don't have to solve another issue. If I had to also solve accuracy on top of everything else, it would get even more messier. But yeah, in general, I'm just happy that this paid off. Otherwise, I would have lost all my money. Today, we have not a very good day with this dagger. As you can imagine, costed quite a bit. I'm going to quickly show you a map right here. I'm currently level 92. I have really no sockets in, but I think it's still worth just showcasing. The playstyle is pretty straightforward. You just place it down. Now, once you get into the map, one thing that will happen is it takes a little bit because your Arcane Cloak procs immediately, and it also costs rage, right? So until you can actually Whirling Blades, it will take a little bit, and then you just start placing. Nice side effect of this whole setup is that you're also curse immune. But yeah, I'll just rush through basically to show you this. I'm not even going to loot or anything else. In terms of defenses, there's still a lot to be done. It feels all right. It would be nice to have some kind of sustain of mana out of combat, especially because of Whirling Blades. It can kind of get weird. And sure, you can cast Whirling Blades like 20, 30 times because, like, in case you guys don't know, this helmet actually does consume your mana quite a bit with like 3% per attack, and that also accounts for your Whirling Blades. But I would like to maybe find some kind of cost when damage taken solution, maybe with mana recoup, because all your mana regen is gone, right? So it can be a little bit annoying out of combat, as you can see right here, right? Like, yeah, there could have been an instance where maybe I couldn't have Whirling Bladed. Let me just get in here real quick. Let's just place some of them down. He's probably going to spawn here. I'm going to place down all my Vaal Lightning Strikes, and boom. Do note that I currently have Returning Proj in my setup, so if I remove that and I got a Nemesis, I would do around about 90 to 95% more damage as well. I'm also not leveled up. I also nowhere near optimized. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. I've already seen a lot of people's takes on this kind of build. I just wanted to kind of throw my head into the ring. I cannot wait for people to come up with even crazier versions. This was just the first thing I kind of thought about. Also, once again, shout out to Void241 for the help. And yeah, was a blast so far. I'm going to make this build better over the coming days, probably the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, and I'm going to chunk out a build guide eventually. Obviously, ridiculously expensive, but what can you do? That's kind of what a lot of the fun items are. And yeah, that's about all I got. Yeah.